Good morning. Oh, I've got Mike now, look out. Good morning, everyone. We will begin in just a few minutes. Thank you for joining us in person and those online. Again, we'll get started in just a few minutes and we will end on time. We're running a little bit behind due to the rain and travel, but glad you're here and we'll get started shortly. Good morning, everyone. We're so thankful that you're here and that we're together. It is my pleasure to introduce to the stage Jay Ward, our community's Poet Laureate with the City of Charlotte. Jay?
Good morning. Have you ever seen one of those nature videos where a gazelle is basically forced to drink from a watering hole it knows has a crocodile in it? In the video I watched, the gazelle's lightning quick reflexes puts on a show of beauty and agility that reverberates through its hot, hazy environment. The crocodile does not care about beauty or elegance. It doesn't care how one improvisational ballet can recontextualize a desert. The crocodile would destroy art if it could, or it would limit art funding so it's only available to those who make art in its own image, or vilify any organization that seeks to do what all nonprofits do, which is make our community stronger while being honest about history and diversity and impact. I'm going to break the metaphor right there. Because in the wild, in real life, crocodiles are also beautiful. To compare them to a threat like this is an insult to the animal. In real life, even the crocodile knows it's just a matter of time before the wind shifts and a bigger predator comes after them too. I stand here this morning as an artist. I stand here as a friend to a lot of nonprofits in Charlotte. I stand as a board member of a nonprofit that was granted funds and then had those funds taken back because our mission no longer aligns with the current administration. I stand here because I know the word pivot is easy to say, but hard to digest when there's already a date on the books and money on the line. I stand here maybe not quite as nimble or sleek as a gazelle, but every bit as willing to help deal with a threat that affects us all. I stand here to listen, to learn, to talk, and that word talk, I know that talking alone won't keep the lights on, and it won't reverse the impact we've already felt, and it won't necessarily eradicate the damage or the uneasiness that grips us in our own board meetings, but we do need to talk. It is a start, and we are, after all, a gazelle, beautiful and elegant. In the video I watched, we did survive.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the newly restored Carolina Theater at Belk Place, if this is your first time. And let me just say thank you for coming out the day after a holiday on a rainy morning. I know I've certainly felt that pain this morning, so I'm guessing a lot of you did as well. And I certainly want to thank everybody that's joining us virtually as well, although those of you in the room get extra credit for being here. So extra pastries for you as you leave. I'm Laura Yates Clark, the president of the Foundation for the Carolinas. And on behalf of Foundation for the Carolinas and the Robinson Center for Civic Leadership, it's my pleasure to open session 1 of the Nonprofit Business Agility Series. Again, I'm thankful to all of you for joining us after a long holiday, and I'm thankful for our nonprofit and funder colleagues who will be participating in the program today. We're also really thrilled to be partnering with our invaluable partners, Share Charlotte, United Way of Greater Charlotte, and the Lee Institute. All together, we helped create the Agility Series. As a community foundation, we are committed to civic leadership marked by transparency, collaboration, and purpose, amplifying the voices of those doing the work on the ground and aligning support where it's needed most. Driven by this, FFTC and its partners created this 3-part series to help strengthen our community's nonprofit and philanthropic sectors to meet the challenges facing our community today and in the future. Our community is used to working across sectors to create better outcomes. All of you do it every day, and COVID-19 proved that we can face tough challenges together. But I doubt that many of us thought we might be facing a crisis of equal or greater proportion quite so soon. To face those tough situations, we have to be candid and clear-eyed in our assessment. So today's session is entitled Reality, because we will gather a picture of the current landscape to build a strong base for response. A recent analysis by Candid found that if government funding were to cease completely, over 14,000 nonprofits across the country would likely exhaust their reserves within 3 months, and nearly 3 million jobs would be at risk. Never mind the impact on those they serve. Today, we'll hear first from a panel of our nonprofit colleagues, followed by a panel of local funders. And from these perspectives, we will leave with an understanding of our challenges, some of the tough choices ahead, and the expectations by which we can hold each other accountable. The second session of the series will be in June, entitled Resilience, and we'll explore specific resources and supports that are available to nonprofits to help meet the needs of our current and future reality. While today's session will focus on information sharing and individual perspectives, our June session will be more interactive and designed for participation. Our third session, Response, will be designed around what we learned from the first 2 sessions and what we hear back from you about what will be most helpful. The reality is that even though nonprofits are being targeted in many ways, the expectations remain high that the nonprofit and philanthropic sector will somehow rise to the challenge and solve the challenge that we face. But there are some realities that we have to come to grips with. First, we will likely be smaller in number and yet must be greater in impact. It is likely that some of our community's nonprofits may not weather this storm. The financial stress and funding losses that some are facing are unprecedented. And unlike what we experienced during COVID, funds and resources are not necessarily on the way. Instead, in many cases, they're being diverted or reduced. There's also a domino or trickle-down effect happening that some of you may be experiencing, such that even if your organization doesn't receive federal funding directly, you may find that other funders are changing their priorities, or other sources of revenue, such as local government, are also being reduced or directed to other things. Second, philanthropy alone cannot be the cavalry. We all have to do this together. While foundations, including the Foundation for the Carolinas, do provide financial support to nonprofits, there are not sufficient philanthropic resources to fill the dollar-for-dollar gaps that are being created or already exist because of changes in federal funding. We're going to have to be collaborative and creative to find new solutions to meet our missions. Third, unpredictability, adaptation, and change define our new normal. This is it, guys. This is the normal. We are unlikely to return to the structures and funding that we previously had anytime soon. Therefore, we must seize the opportunities for collaboration, partnership, and innovation like we never have before. At the foundation, nonprofits remain at the heart of service and resilience in our community. And to be clear, when any part of our community faces challenges, every part of the Foundation for the Carolinas will respond. So I want to share some specific things that we are working on to support the sector in addition to the series we're kicking off today. Recently, we co-hosted with Share Charlotte, the future of philanthropy in the Charlotte region, and a nonprofit policy conversation with the North Carolina Center for Nonprofits, both focused on building a more connected, informed, and resilient nonprofit sector. We're also introducing our fund holders to nonprofits and timely issues facing our community through such events as FFTC Connects and offering platforms for community dialogue and visibility for nonprofit work. We're also working in partnership with United Way and UNC Charlotte to better understand the needs of nonprofits through surveying tools. More to come on that front. And while our pool of discretionary funding is limited, we're reviewing all options for how we might use what is available with a focus on strategic support that reinforces nonprofit sustainability. Soon, we'll launch a digital hub of nonprofit resources and supports on the Foundation for the Carolinas website that will be regularly updated to provide the latest information and access to supports. And in the coming weeks, we will also launch a new partnership with the business community to connect experienced private sector experts with nonprofit organizations to help build resilience and agility plans, help facilitate partnerships and mergers where necessary, and provide other expert guidance. We're also, and we're still figuring out what this looks like, but we're exploring ways to support the nonprofit sector through mental health and wellness supports. We recognize that this is a sector that is tired, that has had 5 years now of continual stress, has faced a leadership and employee drain, cannot meet their budgets the way that they used to in many cases, and that cumulative stress is adding up. So again, we don't know exactly what that looks like. If you have thoughts and suggestions, we want to hear them, but I think it's a really critical component of what we do to ensure the ongoing resilience and sustainability of the sector. Finally, Foundation for the Carolinas has launched a longer-term civic leadership strategy that will create lasting infrastructure and center community voice in all that we do. We want to listen, amplify resources to help you accomplish your missions, elevate what works, and stand in the gap with you when needed. These efforts are just beginning. We'll announce additional supports as we seek and find collaborative opportunities locally and nationally, and we will remain responsive in real time. It is no secret that we are in for some hard choices and difficult decisions for our community. And I know we all wish there were quick and easy solutions, but there aren't any. I do, however, hold something close that I think is even more powerful, and it's an unshakable belief in the ability and determination of this community to find ways forward together. Today is evidence of that we're on the path already, and I find hope and optimism in that very truth. We're deeply grateful for all that you do in the community, and we're proud to partner with you in this work. I thank you again for being here, and I look forward to being on this journey with you. Now I'd like to welcome my good friend, partner, and SVP of Strategy and Impact for the Robinson Center for Civic Leadership, Tracy Russ, who will introduce our first panel and moderate the discussion. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Tracy Russ. I want to add my welcome again to all of you in person and online. It is my great pleasure, and please join me in welcoming our nonprofit leader panel and colleagues and peers this morning, beginning with William McNeely with Do Greater, Laura Belcher with Habitat for Humanity, and James Taylor with Ascend Solutions. Thank you to all three of you for joining us. Laura, I do want to give you a special thank you. She is demonstrating agility in real time this morning. as she jumped in to substitute for a panelist who had a family emergency and could not join us. So Laura, thank you. We will explore what our current landscape looks like, what reality is for you and your organization and the community as an extension. This morning we'll talk about some of the responses that are either active or that you are considering. And then we'll talk about what leadership looks like in this moment as a panel. And please consider all of this food for thought as we look into the future in our next session around resilience. And those of you online, if you have ideas, questions, as Laura said, please do enter them into the chat. We're not taking live questions today, but the next session will include those questions. So I'll begin with, if each of you could share with us and with everyone here a little bit about your organization, what you do, and what the impacts are of the work that you do in the community now. And Coach, I will start with you, please.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is William McNeely. As Tracy has said, I'm the founder and CEO of Do Greater Charlotte. Do Greater started about 5 years ago with this idea of providing access and exposure to technology, particularly creative technologies, to under-resourced communities by providing training in entrepreneurship, innovation, and digital design. And so over the last 5 years, we've served hundreds of kids, introducing them to cool, innovative spaces, tools and technology, and a nurturing community around them to build their economic mobility. So some of the things that we've, have been excited about is the number of youth and young adults who have actually activated in our spaces, particularly our physical spaces that we build and our mobile technology spaces that we have as well, that literally go out into communities and serve the population in those communities with what we call creative collisions, the opportunity for youth and young adults to connect with creative and entrepreneurial professionals to move forward their journey around entrepreneurship and particularly economic mobility. And so we are excited about where we are today as an organization as we continue to move into additional locations, additional neighborhoods, additional communities with this whole idea of what we call creativity as a platform.
Wonderful, thank you. And we're looking forward to the opening of the new facility and center in Uptown, just blocks away from Foundation for the Carolinas, and excited about, and thank you, Coach, for everything you do with the foundation, including hosting our Beyond Open Small Business Grant Program training session. So we appreciate that. Thank you. Laura, tell us about Habitat for Humanity.
Absolutely. So glad to be here, Tracy. Habitat is building homes for low-wage earners in our community. So we've been doing that for 41 years in Charlotte. In addition to building homes, we repair homes, and so that's a big part of our emphasis is to make sure that we are keeping homes in a safe place for people to age in place. And the third thing that we really focus on is financial education. We want to work with the community and let people know what it takes to be home buyer ready. And so in doing that, we'll work with about 500 families a year across our 3 programs, and just recently crossed the 5,000th family that we've worked with here in Charlotte. So 3 goals, all focused on home ownership and building equity.
Wonderful. Thank you for all that you do. James, tell us about Ascend Solutions and what you do, what your impact is in the community now.
Good morning. So Ascend Nonprofit Solutions was the former Children and Family Services Center. We rebranded in 2000.
James, I think we might have a mic off. Is it on? No.
Is that better?
Again, agility in action.
How about this one?
Perfect. Thank you.
All right, so Ascend Nonprofit Solutions was founded as the Children and Family Services Center. We're over on 5th and Davidson. And we moved from being just a facility to house nonprofits to being a provider of shared services to help amplify the missions of nonprofits. And we serve a couple dozen organizations through our shared services of finance or accounting operations, as well as human resources, IT, and then of course facilities. And our focus is on how do we make your work more effective by giving you more time and energy to focus on your mission and fundraising in this time as well as throughout our history of 22 years.
Thank you. And to each of you, again, thank you for all that you do. And to everyone here, we're mindful that as leaders, you represent organizations that are working across a variety of sectors and meeting a variety of needs: the arts, health, child and family well-being, those that are on the stage with us. We hope that you hear a bit of your story in everything that the panelists today on the stage will share, and certainly consider the foundation as a hub and a home for your story to be active. So while you may not be on the stage today, we hope that you view this entire event, this series, as a home, and your voice is important to us always. Let's talk about what reality looks like for you and your organization in this moment. And Laura, if you don't mind, I'll start with you because you may have the most visible role in most immediate impacts, perhaps. But what are you seeing? What are the impacts now? What do you think may happen? Let us know what your perspective is.
Yeah, so it's a challenge right now in so many different ways. And we're trying to stay fact-based versus fear-based. That's something that I've talked to the team about. So the fact is, right now, from our organization and a housing perspective, on a federal funding level, there has not been any confirmed cuts to HUD funding. I don't believe that will stay that way, but at the moment, the fact is that we haven't had cuts to HUD, but it would be unlikely that they'd be the only federal agency to not be cut. We are a recipient of funds coming through the city and the county as a subrecipient for that. So we're watching the funding side of it carefully. We also believe that we're going to be impacted by increased costs due to tariffs. And we use lumber that comes from Canada, and we use a lot of materials that are created offshore. And so we are budgeting for increases in costs. So a little bit of a challenging budget season when you've got revenues that you think are at risk and costs that are going up. So that's some of the reality that we're facing right now.
And Laura, what might some of the impacts be for the people that you serve in the community?
Yeah, absolutely. If we see cuts to federal funding that have a impact on us, it will have to change the programming that we're able to offer. It will either slow down our ability to build or reduce the number of families that we're able to serve. But we don't have the insight into that to know right now. We receive funding across 5 different funding streams. And so I'm not able to guess what reduction and when and how that might impact programming. So we're in a little bit of a limbo.
Thank you. Definitely a time of uncertainty. James, tell us what you see from your perspective, not only as an organization, intrinsic to the organization, but you are a home and a support platform for lots of nonprofits. Tell us what you see.
It's a frightening time, I think, for a lot of our agencies, and we've had conversations amongst executive directors around how do you manage language? Do you change language? Do you stand steady? What does it look like to be true to your mission, while also managing in the conversations that need to take place with federal funding? But the reality is, particularly since the pandemic, but over the last 30 years, nonprofits have become significantly more dependent upon federal funding as nonprofit sector has grown substantially, which puts nonprofits at greater risk, and our building is not immune to that. And we have seen organizations that are willing and able to take things on head first with a lot of lead time, as much lead time as possible. They're managing okay. Those organizations that are paralyzed by fear or paralyzed by their inability to recognize the situation are not doing well. And that happens both at the executive level and at the board level. And so fact versus fiction, or fear, thank you. I mean, that's an important thing to manage because you've got to move outside of the feeling that comes with the uncertainty that exists, because you have to keep a cool head to understand what are you able to do now, and how do you find whatever glimmer of opportunity there is to leverage that to move forward? And so we're trying to coach our organizations where we can in that space. We're also trying to help manage those organizations that are moving towards the end of their operation to do that with responsibility, to minimize liabilities that may carry over. And we're also doing a heck of a lot of moving around in the building as people need less space. We're moving suites, all these kind of stuff. And we're set up with long-term leases that creates a lot of paperwork that goes with that. But then there's just frankly some logistics that go on there. One last thing that's directly impacting us, we have a 22-year-old building, and you have things that go on with that. And our cooling tower is the thing that is taking up more of my time than I care for. But when we went out for bid, we started seeing contracts coming in with tariff disclaimers. And when you're talking about a $240,000 piece of equipment with the potential for an additional 25 to 120%, I don't know where these things are made, that becomes material and it gets your attention. So those are the kinds of things that keep all of us on our off of our toes and more on our heels, and we need to get back into that stance of openness to be able to address the next challenge, because there will be more challenges coming.
Certainly will be, and a part of our intention and hope from this entire series is that we are helping to build capacity, ability, skills, and knowledge for the community to embrace resilience, agility for any challenge, any opportunity, not just the one we're facing right now, although we are definitely in a moment. Do greater. If there were ever a time for us to call to do greater, it's now. What do you see at Do Greater, and what are your observations around impacts in the community so far?
Yeah, I think for us, it's as a small organization, only being around for about 5 years, I think the word agility is built into what we do. We're always trying to understand specifically around where we fit in the ecosystem around Charlotte. But what is it that we are good at, and what is it that we do? So as last year we started this idea around niching down into what we're good at. And fortunately enough, we started to think about how we exist in the entrepreneurial ecosystem of Charlotte, being known more as an entrepreneurial support organization that supports youth and young adults and opportunity youth, and also being that connection between the quarters of opportunity into communities all around Charlotte. So we started to think about how our model changes as it relates to doing those things. We call this ecosystem of opportunity. So we started to look at that and started to look at how we would move forward. Case in point, as you mentioned, the facility that we're building down the street and becoming the hub of opportunity for youth and young adults in our community. But when you start something like that as a small organization and then start to push up against these headwinds that we did moving into 2025, you really have to be agile around pledged funding that didn't come in, or the timeline and pipeline of funding that you have to manage. And so we've been doing extremely creative things to move the project forward. But you also start to see, from our perspective, this idea of, again, not only where you fit, but how do you complete something that is a project that everybody sees as beneficial, particularly around the North Tryon Tech Hub and what's happening in North Tryon, and being a very small organization that is looking at funding cuts, that's looking at being considered as a DEI type organization, how you navigate through that with some of the messaging that you have. How do you move through the fact that funders are pushing their funding back or cutting those altogether? So we've really had to dig deep into our organization and looked at not only changing the business model, but looking at how we collaborate and partner with other organizations. Really focused on a 50-50 split, grant and donations here, but earn revenue. how do we leverage our assets? How do we leverage the opportunity for us to create revenue that's not dependent upon the whims of the economy and the community as well. So we've really dug deep into changing the structure, partnering, collaboration, and creating these earned revenue opportunities.
Thank you. And we're going to talk about responses more in just 1 second. Before we pivot to that point, I want to ask each of you to comment on how the current moment, and I'll say crisis, feels the same or perhaps different than the crisis around the COVID-19 epidemic. And certainly we would all agree that that was indeed a crisis. It was swift in development, severe in impact, and in some ways it feels like we might be in a similar moment on the heels of a crisis that many would say we have not yet fully recovered from. How is this moment different than what we faced during COVID-19 and particular to your organization? What does that mean? And Laura, I'll start back with you, if you forgive me for putting you on the spot again.
In some ways it feels similar. Just we're a fiscal year end of June 30, and so kind of going through the budget process right now, and thinking back 5 years ago, going through the budget process when we didn't, really know what the future was going to hold. Were we going to be able to operate? Were things going to get worse before they got better? So there's some muscle memory to that aspect. I think what feels different this time is maybe a feeling that universally, nationally, we're not all in this together, and we're not trying to work towards a common solution, and so it feels a little bit like it's being done to us without a lot of engagement to try and figure out how to go forward from that. So I felt like it just feels a little bit different, that we've got a little less control. We didn't have any control then either, so I don't know why it feels like it's less control now, but it really does feel like less control.
Do you hear elements of what you just described from your clients?
Yeah, I mean, we're hearing from some of our families and our homeowners that, they've got fear about the future. They've got, they as homeowners, they've got mortgages that they've got to pay, and they've got some anxiety about, the economy and, the risk of losing income or cutting hours or things like that. So we're in communication with them to make sure that they're, reaching out to us for whatever help they need.
Thank you. James, clearly facilities had to quickly adapt, and organizations had to quickly adapt during COVID. Tell us about how this moment feels different for you, your organization, and those that you support in the community via Ascend now.
So I'm a bit of a weakness there because I was in Richmond running a United Way during the pandemic, and it was very different for me. But my understanding is that our organization really leaned into the moment to try to figure out how to be helpful to these organizations that were going through so much. And Jim Bales, who is in the room, I believe completed umpteen PPP loans for our agencies, learned it once and repeated it, which I don't know if it made it any easier, but kudos to Jim for that. But there was a sense of a playbook that was being written as it was going along. And we were all trying to figure out how to do this. And I would agree with Laura, this feels different. We had a scenario back in 2020 where something was happening that was reshaping the way we existed. And we were trying to figure that out as much as possible together. Our society is being reshaped again today. And it's being reshaped intentionally in ways that not all of us agree with. And that feels materially different. And I think it creates anxiety for all of us, and not just nonprofits. The funders in the room, your organizations are trying to figure out, if you're a foundation, are you going to get taxed? How much? If you're a corporation, what's going to happen to your supply chain? All of these things, the uncertainty that exists, unlike it being a response to something we didn't understand, this is being done intentionally. And some people do understand the playbook, most of us do not.
Thank you. And Coach, tell us from your perspective, is this a different moment? Does it feel different? And what does that mean for Do Greater?
Yeah, it definitely feels different for us. I think as a young organization during COVID, we were brand new. And so we were learning around why we even existed and what our purpose was all about. And so we used COVID, we used COVID as this, an opportunity to understand and get more deliberate around what we do. So we built something and took the lessons that we learned from COVID to grow from a mobile space to a physical spaces. So I think that was a disruption in our process at that point. This is definitely a divergence. This is something that we see that is a lot different than before because there's a lot of things happening at the same time. Not only are we struggling with with funding pipelines and things like that, but we're also in a new environment that our focus of what we do is changing. So with AI and automation and all these things happening, particularly from an entrepreneurship and creativity standpoint, we have to start looking at not only focused on moving our organization forward, but how do we deal with the things that are changing around us. And so we talk about things like if innovation is happening faster outside of your organization than it is happening inside, then you've got an issue where we need to start looking at how do we innovate out of this chaos. And so throughout my business career, we've always had this idea that if it's a chaotic environment, that there's this sliver of hope that you look for, particularly around your business model, your staffing, your operational capacity, your processes, all of this. Now that you start to, you have to start to evaluate and look for that piece. And I'll tell a quick story. I used to always tell my son, he was a football player. He was really, really small playing football, and he was a running back, very quick. And I would always tell him as he was, jutting through the offensive line with these big kids, he would come out on the other side as this little kid, finding the crease and the next steps moving forward. And so I would always think about that as, how do you now see what's happening around you, but find that little crease of hope that your organization can operate in and can move you forward and propel you through the chaos. And so that's what we're looking for now, is how do we niche down, how do we focus on this creativity as a platform, as we call it, and move our organization forward and come out better on the other side.
Wonderful. And I'll segue from your great points to ask the next question as we pivot over to your response and what you are doing out as organizations and what you might be thinking about as options. And James, I'll come back to you in a two-part question. First, in the moment that we've just described, and acknowledging that change is afoot, whatever the specific tactics, responses might be, what are the values that you are holding close and your organization is holding close that will guide the kinds of decisions that you'll make? And love, to any degree of being candid that you can be, what are some of the responses and decisions that you're making now, and what are some that you might face but have not faced yet?
So I think from a value standpoint, we see ourselves as helping make you better. And what we do is in many ways in the background, but we hire those skill sets, and most of the people that are at Ascend would prefer not to be up on the stage. I think that's true. And so I think what we're looking for is how do we maintain the value of saying what we do is helping you focus on the crisis at hand. So you don't need to worry about your financial statements. We'll tell you when you have a cash flow issue, and we will bring that to your attention repeatedly. We'll help you manage through your HR situation. If you're in a layoff scenario, we'll help you strategize around that. We talked about AI just briefly here, but I mean, the cybersecurity threat is growing rapidly. And our team has a lot of opportunities around cybersecurity to understand that. How do we build that? So we're focusing on what are we doing within our operation to make you all better, and that's the prevailing values that we bring. As we look at what we're doing in response to this moment, there are a variety of things we're doing. First and foremost, we're in the process of setting ourselves up structurally with the IRS to allow us to serve more nonprofits. We have been tethered to the corner of 5th and Davidson, and we're looking at how do we help more nonprofits across the region. And that is something we're beginning to do, and we're beginning to do it in a fairly significant way. And there's a lot of tax language I could share, but I'm not going to. So we're looking at that. The second thing we're really looking at doing is how do we think about what we do from an efficiency standpoint so that we can be able to serve more organizations with the same resources. The last thing I'll say is our board has recognized the moment that exists in this point in time. We do have organizations that are moving into different places. We have different kinds of things that are happening. Our funding model has shifted in the last 12 months as well. And so we've approved a deficit budget for the coming fiscal year with the recognition that we have skill sets and we have talents that will be necessary in the coming 12 months in ways that we don't know yet. And the last thing we want to do is to deprive this community of the resource that we are based on a fairly basic sort of budget line item looking. So we've invested in helping our community in the future in ways that you may need us to. So let us know.
Thank you. And Laura, you mentioned earlier this idea of intentionally pivoting away from a fear frame. What are the values that you and your organization are holding close to help pivot away from that fear framing?
What we've done is really tried to continue to focus on our core values and our current strategic plan, and not waver from those at all, right? So while we've looked at some of, language on our website and some of the executive orders around activities and use of certain words and things like that, we are staying very focused on our core values, who we serve, how we serve, and who we are in the community, and not changing any of that. And so despite some of the anxiety of funding and other changes, we are staying true to who we are and who we serve, and that gives us hope and strength.
And let me ask you just quickly, is it important that you proceed from that set of core values as you're thinking about specific decisions, or is it the decisions that really are first and foremost to you?
No, I think, in a time where it feels chaotic and it feels like things are being done to us, I think it's important for us to stand up and say who we are and who we serve and how we do that, and use that as our guiding principles. So I think that helps in this time of uncertainty.
Thank you. And William, you mentioned this idea of innovating out of chaos. Is that as much a value statement as it is a strategy statement for you at Do Greater? And can you unpack that for us a bit?
I mean, I think it's both. I mean, for us, it's always understanding our innovative vision around what we exist to do. And I think in order for us to do that, we had to very early on identify, what it is that we exist for. What is the why that we have? And I think if you ask any of our staff members around, and we only have 5 of them, so if you ask our staff and you ask them why we exist, they would say, hopefully they would say our core value unit, we call it, is creative collisions. It's what most people call economic connections. So if we're not creating those type of connections and collisions, then we don't need to exist. And there's a lot of different ways for us to do that. So in a chaotic environment for us, we double down on that. So we look at how we create those connections hyper-locally in communities. So we're there in the community on the west side or the north side or the east side, creating that core value. That happens a lot of different ways. I mean, you talked about one when you talk about we hosting do greater hosting beyond open. That's a connection that we can have when we have you in our spaces, and we can connect you with the kids that we have in our community. So that happens hyper locally, but we can continue to expand that around the community by creating these spaces, whether we host them ourselves or whether we partner with somebody else to host them in their facility. We're still focused on that core value, and that core value doesn't change. So when we build a 20,000 square feet space as we're doing uptown, we're expanding the scope of what we do and allowing us to create more of those collisions. But they're still one-on-one. We still count them as one. But now we can do more of that, and we can create this, what we call this ecosystem of opportunity, where kids can come into our spaces and not only can connect to the community, but can be a part of the economic engine of Charlotte, the uptown ecosystem. And so what we're doing now is we're trying to understand how to double down on that and create more of those, how to partner with more organizations to create those, how to partner with our corporate partners to create more of those for their employees, for their affinity groups, how they show up in the community. We want to be the conduit for creativity for those organizations and the community through our spaces, through our mobile units, through our staff, through everything that we do. And so that's how we're kind of unpacking that innovation out of chaos.
Thank you. And it's interesting, and Laura, I'll turn to you. You just heard William McNeely talk about what, if I didn't hear the word, I would have heard him describing collaboration, which he described as collisions, as opportunities, which is very interesting, and it makes me curious around your perspective on, and I'll go to each of you, as you're thinking about responding and how to be agile, and this idea of collisions that happen by choice or those that you may choose. What are the considerations for you and your organization around developing partnerships, around collaboration, around creative collisions? And and I want to own that the word collaboration is one we use in this sector a great deal, and it sounds warm and it connotes positive outcomes, but it's not easy, is it? What are some of the considerations that you have in your mind around that?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is we don't do anything alone, right? Everything that we do is a form of partnership or collaboration, whether it's working with our donors, our engagement with our volunteers, our funders, the families that we serve. Everything we do is done in partnership. And I do think that your question earlier around what is similar or dissimilar to COVID from 5 years ago, I do think that coming out of that, there was opportunity to do some creative collaborations on delivering of programs and things like that. I think that will come out of this moment as well. I don't know that I've got the key to the next new programmatic solution for us, but I do think that sometimes these times of challenge and crisis can create new collaborations, new opportunities, new programmatic solutions. And I think we're going to need that, right, as we look to the future and we want to serve this community as strong as we want, and as impactfully as we want. I think we're going to have to do it together.
And James, you are not in a facility, you are hosting a creative facility in a place that brings nonprofit organizations with connected missions, but also focused missions literally in proximity. Does partnership and collaboration happen organically, naturally, across or among the organizations that you're in close connection with? Do you hear those conversations happening?
We certainly see collaboration happen. The only way it's going to happen is organically. Forced collaboration is not collaboration. And so that's something that we try to provide avenues for that. So the conversation we had around federal funding was a conversation of the willing. Not everybody participated. We've had other conversations where we've had that kind of people raising their hands to be part of it. At the end of the day, I think this environment is going to create a little bit more focus around how do you collaborate, how do you look at collaboration on steroids, because I think, unfortunately, we're going to have to see some conversations around merge. That's never popular, but the reality is right now, if missions are going to survive, organizational structures may have to change. And so we're there to be helpful in whatever that looks like, but we're also not in a position, nor do we want to be in a position to try to direct that. And so collaboration, somebody told us from Iowa actually that collaboration happens at the speed of trust, and that can be very slow. And so we have tried to provide the trusting environment to help make it a fertile field for collaboration, and we see that happening in certain areas. But our organizations do not have the same missions, and so that's where forced collaboration or common conversations are not as natural, even if we're all in the same address.
Thank you. And Coach, you've talked about trust a lot in the community, and James, thank you for bringing trust up. How important is this idea of trust in reaching out, in connecting with and for other organizations that you might think are reasonable or viable candidates for a partnership, a collaboration, perhaps a merger? What are the signals that you are looking for as you think about, is this a place for trust? Is this a viable option for partnership, collaboration, and perhaps a merger?
Oh, merger.
Yeah.
I mean, I think we look at this a little differently because it was built into what we do from day one. So we create, as Do Greater, we create these creative labs as platforms. So we've always, from day one, thought about what we do as a platform of collaboration. So I used to tell our staff all the time, we run 3 businesses. We are a nonprofit organization, we run an event space, and we have a coffee shop. So all of those things are aggregated into our entire model. And so collaboration was always day one, going out and finding organizations that support us, understand our mission, and can help us move forward. And so it was all about taking these assets that we have and literally monetizing those assets on top of the programmatic things that we do to increase our earned revenue opportunities. And so now we start to look at organizations that that trust us, that we've worked with over the last 5 years, and deepening those relationships to increase our earned revenue opportunities. So, I take a couple examples. One, we received a Knight Foundation grant to start a screen printing academy. So we're going out and buying screen printing equipment because we have gained trust with an organization that helped us around screen printing. Well, now we have that in-house, and we won't use the entire capacity of that screen printing equipment. So now we turn that into working with a trusted partner to not only work with us to create these programs for our kids, but use the excess capacity that we have in that technology for earned revenue. So they will go out and promote our usage, our business, our in-house business, to create that earned revenue coming back to us. And our kids get to participate in that as well, because they're being trained in that, to run a screen printing business, but they're also doing that now because we have excess capacity. So we'll do that for screen printing. We do it for videography and photography as well, where youth are being trained in our Creative Digital Academy, and the excess equipment that we have just sitting in a storage facility now can not only be used by our kids to go out and gain and increase their opportunity for revenue and monetize their skill set, but we can call our partners in to say our kids can do this for you and get paid. But at the same time now we're building a full digital studio uptown here where we will offer that to organizations and companies and for-profit organizations all around the city. So it's taking this innovative approach to your programming, your assets that you have, whether it's physical, equipment, and then monetizing that back into your organization for earned revenue. So we look for organizations that we built trust with to help us to do that, because they have to be mission aligned in order for us to do that well.
Thank you. And as leaders of organizations that I believe most people would say are impactful and important to the community, how are you conveying the reality that's around your organization to your board members and engaging them in the moment? James, I think you said part of this is calling the moment. Do you have specific counsel for your peers and colleagues around how they might engage their board members as leaders in this moment? And Laura, I'll start with you.
I'm fortunate because I've got a great board, very engaged, and we do an annual retreat, which happened to fall in April of this year. So the timing of it was great to be able to talk about the current environment and really have great, extended conversation about it because it was in a retreat and not trying to be, condensed into a quick board meeting. So I think that has helped. I emailed the board periodically with updates on what's happening that has impact to our organization that would be, out of the norm. And then, the biggest thing right now that staring us in the face is the budget for fiscal year 26 and what assumptions are we making. And so, talking to the board, we're moving forward with a business as usual budget because we don't have any other information. And then we'll deal with the information when we get it. So, engaging them in the conversation around kind of the scenario planning for the future, but going forward, business as usual.
Thank you. James.
I think it's important, particularly to the executives in the room, as personal as the decisions that are being made to us, I guess, may feel, it's critical to recognize that that's not a helpful way to look at this. Largely speaking, nobody in Washington is thinking about Charlotte, and that may or may not feel good. But it does give you the room to say, this is not directed at James. This is not directed at my institution. It's a look at it from a more projective standpoint. That's what your boards need. Boards need to have a calm approach, a reasonable approach that helps them make the right choices. And boards are up to that challenge, good things will happen. If your board is not up to that challenge, then it's not help to get in the right direction. But this is not a time for new findings. This is not a time for fear mongering. It's not a time to look at the facts to understand you do have an opportunity. If so, what is it? And if we do we have the courage to ask it?
What's the one thing you would counsel your colleagues on communicating and engaging with the board? I think it's reaffirming the mission and why. I mean, we're a young organization moving from a working board to a more governing board. So for us, for me, I should say, as a founder and executive director or CEO of the organization, it's on my back at this point now that because I founded the organization, I founded on my personal mission is to reaffirm that, but also lay out the vision for what it looks like over the next 5 to 10 years when it's not needed anymore. So I think from our perspective, a little different and really reaffirming the why and why we exist, but then getting them on board right now for very tactical and specific things. So one-on-one type of conversation. I need marketing, I need fundraising, I need branding, I need PR, I need all these very specific things that I need you to help me with. And I need each one of you right now to go out and start in order for us to move through this process. For me, that's what we are as an organization. I'm asking for very specific things. I think in this time where we are as an organization, fundraising, building, redeveloping our model, it's our model. Really, from a working board perspective, we want to utilize the expertise of those individuals very specifically. Thank you. We are at time for a lot of announcements and a lot of good living or Welcher, James Taylor, thanks to you all together. Thank you all of you for being a part of this conversation, and we definitely look forward to more foundation analysis with you, with all of you. We're on this journey together, and whatever future plans, we will be hand along the way. So thank you for your time today and for being a part of this. We have our funders panel up next, and I will turn this over to Peter White and the Moline Institute.
Thank you. All right, now. Thank you, Tracy. Really appreciate that and appreciate the perspective of all of our nonprofit colleagues. I want to thank our panelists for their willingness to join us today. We'll see how excited they are after we conclude. Recent federal funding cuts have created an unprecedented challenge for nonprofit organizations. As Laura mentioned, recent data shows that more than 14,000 nonprofits could run out of cash within 3 months if government grant-making halts, jeopardizing millions of jobs and essential services in areas like human services, education, and housing. A few weeks ago, we convened a discussion with over 70 nonprofit professionals and staff. Staff of foundations and corporations joined us. One of the key requests in that group was to hear more from funders. In addition to this request and continued dialogue with local funders, the Center for Effective Philanthropy conducted a survey of nearly 900 nonprofit organizations that receive funding from foundations and corporations that give at least $5 million in grants annually. Their responses sought more communication from their funders about the implications of the current context. They expressed worries about current and future funding levels, as well as changing funding priorities. Overwhelmingly, they were seeking larger and more unrestricted support during this uncertain time. I've personally been in the room with many nonprofit organizations expressing similar thoughts and emotions. This panel was formed in response to these desires, and I want to thank our panelists for their willingness to engage with us today. Your transparency, vulnerability, and counsel is deeply appreciated. All right, let's jump right in. Right. Foundations and corporations play a vital role in supporting the sector. The sheer scale of federal funding means that private philanthropy simply cannot fill the hole left by the elimination of federal services. Given the magnitude of recent federal funding cuts, the reality is that private foundations and corporations cannot fully replace this lost support. How is your organization approaching its funding strategies and this crisis to address both the immediate needs and the long-term sustainability of nonprofits?
Well, first of all, thank you, Peter. Appreciate the opportunity to be here today, and it's good to see folks in the audience. Let me say thank you for all you do every day for people in Charlotte and in the Carolinas, and it's an honor to be on this panel as well. Before I answer that specifically, it might be helpful if I can give just a little background on the Duke Endowment. We are a private foundation that was founded more than 100 years ago. We just celebrated our centennial on December 11th of this past year. So we're 100 years old. We were formed by a gentleman named James Buchanan Duke, who signed a trust indenture in 1924. And that trust indenture still directs how we give away our money largely today. In fact, in the trust indenture, James Buchanan Duke said that he wanted the trust indenture, which takes about 45 minutes to read, he wanted it read aloud once a year to the full board so they could be reminded of what he wanted to accomplish with his resources. So we're very committed to that, and we have a very specific focus. Our 4 areas of support that are laid out in the trust indenture are higher education, where we help 4 schools in the Carolinas, Johnson C. Smith, and Furman. We also help in healthcare, primarily through the medical system of healthcare. Hospitals historically, now we're trying to work with hospitals so that they can extend their services to create wellness in communities. We also help funding the child welfare system. Back in 1924, Mr. Duke was interested in helping orphans and half orphans. Today, we try to help families who are either involved in the child welfare system or have risk factors for entering that system. And then finally, the Dukes were devout Methodists and believed strongly in rural communities. So we help rural United Methodist churches in North Carolina. So all of our philanthropy is in North Carolina and South Carolina. The rural church work is only in North Carolina. Mr. Duke's trust indenture is very detailed. He even allocated how he wanted the money spent. So 46% goes to higher education, 32% goes to healthcare, and so forth. And he also wanted us to be focused. In fact, he's got a phrase in his trust indenture that I particularly like, and I think it's particularly salient. And that is, he said something to the effect of, I'm going to paraphrase, he said, I might have tried to do more, but I fear that in doing so, I would actually accomplish less by reason of attempting too much. So he wanted us to be focused, and we are focused. 3 of the 4 groups of organizations that we fund. Higher education, we're reading all about that in the newspaper, and research funding, healthcare, Medicaid, Medicare, child and family well-being, the child welfare system, Title 4E, Title 4B, Medicaid dollars. 3 of our 4 areas depend heavily on public funding, heavily. And even with our narrow footprint of those areas in North Carolina and South Carolina, our dollars, as Peter said in opening comments, they pale in comparison. So if I may, I'd like to give you some context there. So in 2024, in America, we, Americans, gave away $550 billion, which is an increase over the prior year, which was closer to $500 billion. Most of that comes from individuals, people who care about their churches and about their local nonprofits and support. Less than 20% of that, or about $100 billion, actually comes from foundations. Now, that does not include corporate foundations. If you were to add them, it would probably be somewhere around 125 to 150 billion. But let's say it's 150 billion to add the corporate funders. If you compare that with the federal government, so I think this year the federal government's budget is, I think, 7 trillion. I went to AI to confirm that. And I also went to AI and said, how much of that goes to social programs and support systems? And about half of it goes there. So think about that 100 billion, not from Duke Endowment, but from all foundations. That's 1/35 of what the federal government provides in social supports and a safety net every year. It may not be an apples to apples comparison, but it's an interesting one. So that's less than 3%. That's 1/35. It's amazing. And again, even with our resources, all philanthropy, as great as they are, they pale in comparison with government. By the way, that does not include state and local government either. So that's another whole area, something to consider. Okay, one other thing, but before I really answer your question, so thank you for that background. But hopefully it gives you some context of what we're talking about. We are on the spotlight as well in terms of our excise tax. So we pay a 1.39 excise tax, which is essentially on our realized gains and income every year. 1.39%. All foundations pay this. For foundations our size, it's going to be moved up to either 5%, and if our assets grow, we'll soon be paying 10%. So that's an incredible increase in taxes, and that'll be money that we cannot give away to philanthropy. I mean, to nonprofits. It'll go to taxes and go to Washington as opposed to nonprofits. All right, so what are we doing to help? So the last few years, we have quietly increased our payout. So we, like all private foundations, are required to pay 5% of our assets out to charity and to nonprofits each year. Over the last several years, we've increased that because of COVID. We've increased that because of Helene. And just this past year, celebrating our 100th year, our board announced its intention. We'll have to see how everything works out, but we're going to try to give away $1 billion more over the next 15 years than what we're required to give away with the 5%. So we're trying to increase our payout. But again, these numbers pale in comparison. What might we do, and then I'll stop, what might we do with our own grantees? I think we probably, given the dearth of our resources relative to the losses, we probably will not try to fill holes. And I think our grantees, some will certainly be disappointed about that. I think instead what we hope to do is to help them transition to a new reality. The other day I was watching, it might have been Squawk Box or some financial show, and they had Mary Barra, who runs General Motors, on there. She's had a remarkable career. It'd be interesting for you to read. But they asked her about what's the auto industry do when government comes after them? And she said, basically, we come together and we try to go to government and say, we want to be part of the solution. We get that we got to make some adjustments. We want to be part of the solution. I think that resonates with me. I know it's easier said than done, by the way, but I think that trying to be more constructive in response as opposed to a purely defensive, which is a natural reaction or response, I think is probably helpful. So the answer is we're not going to be able to fill the gaps that are being created. That was a long answer for a short final. Sorry about that.
I appreciate you scoping the issue. Rod, and I know that this challenge is fairly new for corporate offices.
Thank you.
Is your approach to this challenge similar or different to the way that you approach the nonprofit community during COVID?
It's different. I think the COVID situation was different. It was, everybody, I think the panel before kind of talked about the similarities and the difference and who was in kind of control. It was different then. We were early kind of in our funding cycle. It was early in the year. We made the intentional decision to be supportive of the nonprofits that we had relationships with, providing unrestricted dollars, trying to get the dollars out the door as quickly as possible to meet the immediate needs. Everyone was impacted, so everyone kind of saw that reality. This is different because we kind of get the information at the same time that you get the information. So when executive orders happen, we get it when you get it. And there are other dynamics that are going on from a corporate side. The regulatory environment that we operate within is significantly different, but we're impacted on that side as well. I know Grace can talk about from a Bank of America standpoint, but financial institutions are particularly under particular regulations. Our bank, particularly our issues over the last 10 to 15 years aren't a secret or anything. So we have particular things that we're trying to deal with as an individual company that we're under from a scrutiny perspective that we're dealing with. So that's a little bit different as well. But no, this is a different situation here because the information is coming out in real time. We're all trying to respond. Many corporations and all the corporations here are very risk averse. So we're trying to create environments to anticipate risk and what that could be in the short term as well as the long term. And we make those decisions based on that. So that's what we're seeing. While COVID was a ever changing, environment, as you mentioned, it's a different feel to how we respond to those things. And we find ourselves in a different economic reality where in dollars that we could deploy in a 2020 or 2021, our economic reality isn't that at this point. And we just don't know what's coming around the corner. So it's hard to plan for things that you don't know how to expect. What's going to happen next month or next week or tomorrow.
We'll come back to that. Tom, in light of what it seems unlikely that the donors, both institutional and individual, are going to fill that void of lost grant and contract cutting. Given that, it seems that the nonprofit organizations will have to make some difficult decisions regarding expense cuts in order to continue to be viable and then be remission. While some may be intuitive to say cutting expenses or program is no longer funded, others are going to require a bit more strategic thought and then reflect the long-term viability of the nonprofit organization. Given that, do you see an opportunity for mergers, acquisitions, or other forms of organizational partnership or structural changes at this time?
Thanks, Peter. Good morning, everyone. Great to be with you today and to be on the panel. Yeah, it is a unique time, and we think about our partners a lot, and as we've heard this morning, the changing conditions are unique, right? I think we're in our second once-in-a-lifetime sector change that we've had in the last 5 years, and so that requires different thinking, and I really appreciate a lot of the comments that we heard from the first panel around how they're thinking around about innovation, how they think about different programming, different revenue streams. All of that has to be part of the consideration that leadership goes through. I do wonder about mergers, and we've looked into that as well, and we've heard some talk about it in this cycle. I think back to 2009, 2010, Foundation for the Carolinas pulled together a pool of capital called the Community Catalyst Fund, and it was specifically set up to serve nonprofits that were going to merge following the great financial crisis and all of the challenge that occurred financially then as well. I think there were 1 or 2 mergers that happened out of that fund, and so it was a very different opportunity and conclusion from that fund. So a lot of the dollars then got repurposed toward innovative sustainability practices from a financial standpoint. So it'll be interesting to see. I think there certainly is the opportunity for mergers to take place. I think in cases, frankly, it's needed, but it has proven to be slightly more challenging for a lot of those to happen and happen effectively. So in a lot of cases, the opportunity for boards to get together with leadership of nonprofits to talk about these mergers, a lot of times they can talk about it, or the opportunity for a third party to come in and help.
How are you, America, thinking about adjustments that will need to be made by our nonprofit community organization?
In terms of well, first of all, Peter, thank you so much for having me, of course, with this panel. Thanks to all of you for what you're doing to drive meaningful work here in our community. Because, and we are, Charlotte, as we all know, right, Charlotte is a growing community and there's a lot of need. But in terms of adjustments, I would say keep on doing what you're doing, what I would challenge, and I do this in my team, and I see some of my teammates here in the room, it's about how do we continue to challenge the status quo? We've got to challenge the status quo. There's so much that we want to accomplish. I like the idea of the about mergers only because I feel, from my perspective, I feel there's a lot of opportunity to create efficiencies, to also scale, and to drive impact. But for all the nonprofits, you've got to take a step back and think about what you want to do differently. And those are the adjustments that you can control. And I say that from the perspective, having been an executive on loan, the bank has a leader on loan program. And I was voluntold to go serve as an interim executive director at Camino Community Center. And I said, you know what? I can go as an executive director, which I had never been in that role in the past. But I said, I'm going to run this like a business. And I don't know if there's anyone here from Camino in the room, but I said, I'm going to run this like a business. I'm going to help them. It was a grassroots organization. But I said, I'm going to help them do this in a different way. And we were able to do that. My 1-year assignment turned into a 2-year assignment because that's how we do things at Bank of America. But what we did is we took that step back and I challenged the status quo just because they had been doing things for a very long time, 14, 15 years. It was my opportunity to come with the board and the small staff that we had to make those adjustments. Leverage your board members and create those opportunities to drive change. Because right now and collaboration is key. Collaborate with your peers, whether you're in the same area or not. Collaborate and drive change. And sometimes it starts with leadership. Sometimes it starts with your board. But those are the adjustments that I think all of you can make to continue to help grow your organization. Our goal at Bank of America is to, and I'm sure with others here on the panel, it's not about just supporting organizations to survive, but to thrive long-term, to be sustainable.
Thank you. All right, the elephant in the room. Let's see if I can leave that on this panel. Another area where there's deep desire from our nonprofit partners to understand the impacts of recent changes is DEI. We are blessed to have so many organizations and corporations in our community that have supported those who have varied life experiences, and those who may come from a starting point that was not as advantaged as others. Everyone with whom I spoke in preparation for this conversation expressed a willingness to engage in this conversation. Not surprisingly, no one wanted to be first to face the question. So, in light of, I'll just ask it the whole camera. In light of the recent federal funding executive orders restricting government funding and increased scrutiny of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, how are you adapting your strategies to navigate the legal, reputational, and operational risks associated with DEI funding to the environment?
First. Do you want, or anybody? Okay. All right. Okay, so first of all, we have sought legal consultation. We did when the executive order came out in late January, and we've been working with them and just met with them last week to go over some changes we're making. And again, though, in answering this, I need to go back to our founder. I need to go back to James Buchanan Duke. He was essentially, he and his family were Lincoln Republicans. He had a very public feud with Josephus Daniels, who ran the Raleigh News and Observer back in his time, who was an avowed segregationist. The Duke family, going back to the 1890s, gave money to Trinity College, wanted it to help it move to Durham from Randolph County. And then another grant following that said, we'll give you more money, but you've got to enroll women. They also helped to start Lincoln Hospital, a hospital for African Americans in the Durham community. One of our named beneficiaries, one of our 4 schools that we fund, is Johnson C. Smith University. What's interesting, throughout this trust indenture that we read aloud once a year, as I said, throughout it, without exception, as he's describing everything that he wants us to consider and do, he says to help all Carolinians regardless of race. So let me show for what that means if we've always had that mindset. Now, when George Floyd, that was 5 years, I know we're that anniversary, 5th year anniversary is happening, we did become more aware that there are ways that we can be more intentional about reaching historically marginalized groups to help mitigate outcome disparities. And what I've learned from our consultation with our attorneys is we probably have to have other reasons for serving people. We cannot make decisions predicated on race or gender. I still believe, and I hope this is not Pollyannish, but I still believe that we can still do what we've always been charged to do, help all Carolinians. We may have to modify our approach a little bit, but I'm hoping the impact of that, while it will be lessened, I want to be honest, I don't think it'll be materially lessened. And in 2 states that we fund, North Carolina and South Carolina, with the demographics that we have in terms of white, African American, and Hispanic, Latino, Latina, I just think we're going to keep doing our work in ways that help to reach all people and try to help them and make a difference in their lives, as we were instructed to do from inception.
Sure. You know, as we talked about, corporate risk averse. So we've, had conversations. Was that funny? Okay, thank you. But so what we've been told, or the direction we've gotten from our leadership, is business as usual. And I think the way Rhett described it, it may look a little different. But these conversations didn't just start this year. I remember Rhett came and joined us at a funder collaborative with United Way last year when we were talking about the Fearless Fund and things of that nature, and how that was impacting all of us in the community and what that was going to be a precursor to. So some of those conversations had started to happen before this year happened, in executive orders and things of that nature. But what we've been told is, business as usual, but it may look a little different. So as nonprofits, navigating, as William talked about, and being able to pivot and navigate in that environment will be key to how you operate, and engage your boards on how you operate. Your boards need to be educated and a part of these conversations. So it's not just on you all as executive directors. Your board needs to be engaged on how you navigate and move forward in this environment. I think there will be some opportunities that will come out of this to talk more about general operating support, unrestricted funding, because I think from a selfish standpoint, I think some funders will prefer to provide funding for general operating unrestricted versus something that's programmatic. And typically funders, our foundation as well, have always wanted to support things that are programmatic because there's impact there. I think there might be a shift into more people wanting to do something unrestricted because they don't necessarily want to be tied to a specific program. So there could be an opportunity there. And I think it's upon all of us as, community leaders and nonprofit leaders in this community to come together and have those conversations on how you navigate. But I think there could be some opportunities created in this environment if we're nimble to navigate the environment that's coming.
I'll be brief. I'll just add. I will say for Bank of America, our commitment to DE&I is firm. We also understand the changes, the challenges, but it's firm, and we're going to be responsible today. We don't call it DE&I. We call it opportunity and inclusion. So we're going to continue, business as usual in terms of, we think about it, the access to equity and the areas that we're aligned to, from affordable housing to healthcare to jobs and workforce development to I'm missing jobs and workforce development, arts, education, investing in youth. So none of that's going to change. I think about our employee networks, and many of you in the room have leveraged our employee networks. We've got a dozen plus in Charlotte and across the company. And of those organizations, you don't, whether it's Black, African American, Hispanic, Asian, LGBTQ, all those remain the same, because you don't have to be Black to be part of the Black professional group. You don't have to be Hispanic to be part of our OLA group. So for us, it's basically business as usual, but what has changed is opportunity and D&I from DEI to opportunity and inclusion.
We touched on this before. One of the challenges of these recent shifts is the unpredictability and uncertainty. It seems that we're in a constant state of reactivity right now. Given that, I know that the Lillian Living Foundation for many years has valued leadership as one of its defining characteristics, or how you direct your philanthropy. How important is leadership stability and strong board governance in building organizational resilience? And what qualities to any of you, I don't have to come here, but what qualities do you look for in resilient partners?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. From what Mr. Levine taught us when he was creating the foundation and establishing how we were going to select to be a part of the community, his foundation seeks to empower underserved Carolinians to be self-sufficient and to strengthen our Jewish community. And as the founder of Family Dollar Stores in the late 50s, wanting to give back to those communities that really helped him get started in those early days was what was the genesis of the foundation. And he had very specific thoughts around how we would select those organizations that we would partner with. And to your question, leadership is the number one component of that decision. And I think the leadership comes along with partnership. To us, those are linked. And so as we seek to create longer term partnerships with community nonprofits and members, that leadership component and assessment has been critical. A significant part of our funding and of Mr. Levine's philosophy has been the concept of now multi-year unrestricted general operating funding. And those decisions are made based on the strength of leadership and our ability to share values and mission and alignment in the community. And we do that across around 400 nonprofits across the Carolinas through our primary mission areas of healthcare, human services, education, and Jewish values. I think about one of the important concepts of leadership that we look into is the joint leadership and ownership between the staff and the board. This is an area that we can really tell, and we involve the board in these conversations, and you can really tell when a board has that level of ownership and leadership connectivity with the staff. So that'll be something that we continue to really enhance and double down on in this time of change. I think that's going to be one of the big differentiators that we see for nonprofits that not only survive but thrive going forward. The time of adaptivity and agility is going to require that level of leadership.
Yeah, I think we talked about the conversation around mergers and opportunities there. Leadership is key. I mentioned before, leadership does extend beyond the executive director and the staff. It has to extend to the board of directors, and they have to be engaged. We had a conversation earlier around mergers and having those conversations from a funder perspective. We talk about mergers and when we have these crisis situations, there needs to be also some transparency there. This fear that if you have a conversation with a funder around a merger opportunity or some of that, whatever situation you may be in, this fear that a funder may look at that negatively, want to kind of squash that. I also, Grace and I have served on several boards together. I serve on several boards, so I'm part of different boards. And I've had the opportunity to be part of conversations with funders sitting in a different seat, talking about mergers or transitions and things of that nature. And in each of those conversations, the funder appreciated the fact that we were upfront and transparent early in the situation to talk about what was going on with the organization and the things that we're thinking about. And in many of those cases, the funder came back and said, how can we support you directly to make this happen? Because at the end of the day, the end user or the client is the one that's going to be most impacted about the services that all of our organizations are providing on a daily basis. So be upfront with your funders about those conversations very early on and be transparent about kind of what the situation is and what you're thinking about. And I think that's part of leadership. And as a board representative, being part of those conversations, I also think, as I mentioned before, it's critical that your board be a part of that process and those conversations and knowing what's going on there as well. But I think it's in these particular times, having those conversations with your funders is critical.
I'll add. I would say in terms of qualities for leadership, I think about stability. I think about mission-driven leadership, strong governance, and a quality that you don't want is you don't want to lose sight. And Laura, you were referring to this earlier. Do not lose sight of your core values and be proactive. And as I said earlier, if you have an opportunity to challenge the status quo as a leader within your organization.
I'll just jump in with a quick story. So probably almost 25 years ago, I had an incredible opportunity, and if you ever get this opportunity, you should do it, to attend a week-long program at Harvard Business School. It's called Strategic Perspectives in Nonprofit Management. And I'll never forget, the first night, they brought us all into an auditorium like this on the campus of Harvard. And we had sent all our mission and vision statements ahead of time, and they put them up on the screen. And we went through a process of dissecting the mission and vision statements. And the one thing that it changed my perspective about my work entirely. But the one thing that came out of that experience was that in most of us, and I'll say foundations maybe most egregiously, most of us, when we talk about our mission, we're talking about who we're serving, why we serve them, where we serve them. We describe our work. Their point was, not often enough do we talk about what difference we're trying to make, what change are we trying to affect. And their encouragement was, you've got to put that you've got to have that undergirding drive and put that into your mission statement, because you're not just you are here to serve. We're all here to serve. And we want to help people move to a different level in terms of where they are. And it made a profound impact on me and how I think about the work of the Duke Endowment. And I think it's might be beneficial just to consider in terms of leadership.
Thank you. I want to circle back to something that Rod brought up a minute ago, and that's the transparency. There's another study published recently that showed that individual contributions are actually up 3.5% year over year. However, the number of individuals who are contributing nonprofitably is declining. So fewer people giving more. One of the things that has been studied over the last couple of months since the executive order began is the fear associated with communicating how these changes are affecting nonprofits. Ron, you touched on the fear of going to the funding organization or to a corporation's funding you and saying, hey, this is what we're looking at. One of the things that exacerbates that fear is the fear of how that can trickle into individual contributions, right? If we show that, this transparency, then individuals also tag on and say, well, I'm not sure that I'm going to give to you because you might be unstable. Think with us a little bit about how can you think about messaging through this in a way that helps nonprofit organizations in general more secure rather than the alternative.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that we heard, and we were having some conversations with the organization, was put the client or the receiving individual or family that you're serving at the center of every conversation. So it's not necessarily about the organization, but what the organization is doing in the community to support that family, that community, that individual, that child. So if you make it about the impact and the work, then hopefully that individual or that organization will understand the impact that you're having. And the conversation is not a one-way conversation, it's a two-way conversation of how can we come together as a collaboration of funder and organization to support that community. And this is the particular need that we have. And this is the work that we've been doing for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, how we've been making impact and changing lives of individuals and families and communities over this time. And how do we pivot in a way that allows us to continue to do this work and have greater impact with your support? So I think at the end of the day, it's not about the sustainability or survival of the organization, but the mission of that organization, as Rhett talked about, the impact that we're having and how do we continue to have that support at the end of the day. I think it's really about centering, who the work is for and what we're trying to accomplish, within the community.
Get on stage and talk about the transparency and candor which you spoke about leverage forward in our community. I want to thank you for your deep investment in our community. What I heard from you is we're still here. We're still finding our existing priorities and building on our way through this just as well. So thank you for your partnership, for your collaboration, and for your willingness to engage.
Thank you.
I've got the working mic. Hey, hi everyone. I'm Melissa Hovey, Executive Director of Share Charlotte, for those that I don't know. Thank you for coming out today. As you can see, Charlotte is such a special community. We have nonprofit leaders and funders coming together to really figure out a solution and how we navigate this uncertain time. And I think we have a lot of experience that we can draw on over past years and different crises. So I'm so grateful to the Foundation of the Carolinas and for all the partner organizations to make this happen in real time, real fast, and to be responsive. I was telling people we're building the ship a little bit as we're flying it, or the plane as we're flying it. And that is a bit intentional to make sure that we are responding to what you need. And so the next event is going to be even more interactive. I know you've had a lot of listening today, but the next one is your chance to be more interactive. And so we have the URLs here to sign up for the next couple sessions. The next one's on June 24th, and it is not June 22nd. That would be very hard. It's actually July 22nd is our third and last one. But as Laura mentioned, the second one is resilience. It's really about more of a conversation, interactive piece of that, and response is really kind of bringing it home through all we've learned. If I could get the next slide, please. Because this is going to, and we will, if you know Sure Charlotte, we send a lot of emails, so you will get this all in email so you can sign up for these next few events. And then the most important thing is telling us how this went for you. I know this is new, this is different. We haven't done this before. So your feedback is critical in helping us shape to make sure that the next few sessions, we get the most value out of your time. We don't take it lightly, the fact that you're taking time out of your critical work day on a rainy Tuesday, on a day after a holiday. So really appreciate you taking this time today. And we want to make sure that everything we do is adding real value back into you as a leader and you as your organization. So with that, we will wrap up with Jay, our poet laureate. Is he back here? There you go. Thank you, Jay.
Reality, resilience, response. The reality is the cultural landscape of Charlotte would be nothing without our nonprofits to make a way out of no way. To do the work for-profits won't do, to do the work well-meaning individuals can't do alone. And I'm talking about, yes, the large nonprofits, but I'm talking about the small nonprofits. I'm talking about the established nonprofits, but also the newer nonprofits that make this city what it is, that drive it. The reality is we might be the last bastion of hope against the book banners or the grant pullers or the defunders. The reality is you need resources. The reality is we got to help each other. The reality is impacts like these can make you question whether you can survive, but you have to survive because the community needs you, because we need you. The reality is we have to find a way. Resilience means we are going to find a way. Resilience means we faced hard times before, we made it then, we can make it again. Resilience means change and adaptation and determination, but resilience also means describing exactly where you are without pulling any punches. Resilience also means telling a potential funder, this is what I do for this community, and if I'm gone, then that is also gone. Resilience means construction. Even if you're not building what you thought you'd be building, you are constantly building something. Response means we can't stop now. Response means somehow, some way. Response means I know how important my work is, so I'm going to listen and learn, but I'm also going to talk, and I'm also going to teach, and I'm also going to find what I can find. Response means I have a story to tell. Small or large or wide or narrow, I have a story to tell. That story came from this land. That story came from my grandmother. It came from every person that I've helped along the way. I have a story that travels time like a seed along the wind. I have a story that's about resilience. I have a story that's about everybody in this room. I have a story and it survives every generation. And yes, they can ban a book, but they cannot ban a story, and they cannot take your story, and they cannot stop your story. We have too much at stake to stop now. Reality, resilience, response, and that is the agility of impact. Thank you for all you do, and thank you for coming. Appreciate it.